Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Wake Up West Coast. I love hearing all of the chatter in the room. That is what this is all about. So thank you all for being here this morning. A warm welcome to all of you here in person and also to our virtual attendees as well. And I also want to share a special welcome. You may have noticed there are some table tents for future prep students. We have some students here from West Ottawa and Hamilton that are a part of a leadership program. A few of them may still be coming in, so if you see a student and you've got a table tent at your table, please just wave them down and let them know that you've got a warm, welcoming seat for them. So let's just give them a warm welcome, and I'm so glad that you're all here this morning. It's so cool to have students here to be able to mingle and meet all of the professionals here. So now I want to send a special thank you to our sponsors. So we have two sponsors this morning. Independent Bank is our morning mingle sponsor. If you did not get a chance to visit their table beforehand, please come afterwards and say hello to them. So let's give Independent Bank a round of applause. Thank you guys for your support. And our program sponsor this morning is Consumers Energy. And so please help me in welcoming Rich Houdeman to the stage. We've got a few minutes to talk with Rich. Rich, thanks so much for being here this morning.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. So just want to ask you a couple of things. First of all, we're about 2 years away from the Campbell plant closure, which is insane. That time is flying. But how is Consumers planning to serve customers in the future with that plant closure?
Well, thanks for asking, Britt. I think, firstly, we just want to let everyone know that we're working on our just transition. We want to make sure we take care of the communities well that are impacted by Campbell. We're working really closely with Port Sheldon Township and the taxing jurisdictions that are impacted, and Lakeshore Advantages have been huge. So we also won't be laying off any employees. We'll find a place for them if they want to stay with us.
That's amazing.
But
yeah.
well, we want to try with that. But in the short term, we're going to buy the Covert natural gas plant. That's pretty much going to backfill what Campbell puts out today. And then over time, we're going to expand our footprint into the renewable space. So that's how we're going to do that.
Fantastic. Mm-hmm. Good. Well, you got a good plan, a couple of years to go. So, yeah, thanks for sharing that update. Sure. So many of us have probably noticed this has been a winter unlike any other, right? We're getting these really intense and damaging storms coming at once. So I know that makes you and your team's job a big challenge. So how are energy providers adjusting and adapting to this kind of weather?
Well, I know what we're looking at doing, and I'm sure some others may be now too. We had this major ice storm, right? Where the 94 corridor just got obliterated. But so we are looking at some surgical opportunities to start undergrounding. 10% of our distribution network is underground currently, which is a lot. And it's a lot easier. We're going to probably look at rural areas first. It's about half the cost to underground out in rural areas that it is in an urban area. So we may look at some of those trouble circuits that are, we have repetitive outages and start to do undergrounding there and piloting how that's going to impact our customers. It's not perfect. Underground outages last longer, but they're less frequent. So we just got to try to find out what makes the most sense in those regards. So that's how we're going to try to do that. We're also investing heavily in what is above ground. We're replacing a lot of our older circuits, our legacy circuits, and we're really increasing our forestry spend. We're going to go to about $100 million a year statewide to try to keep those circuits clear that I've also been getting a lot of repeated outages. So that's how we're going to try to tackle that.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, because if this continues, we'll need some different solutions, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yep. Great. Okay. Now, I have to ask, you got a beard going on here. Tell me about the beard.
Yeah, thanks. I think I almost had its own name tag when I came in. But so I don't have a beard usually, but I'm on the United Wear board up in Muskegon, and Nate Hoffman helps us out down here in Ottawa County from the plant. But so it's for the Dolly Parton Imagination Library. There's a lot of funds being matched to raise money. So a lot of us took on a campaign to do that. So that's what that's all about. So it's Literacy Month. Anyway,
Fantastic.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so last year you gifted your time to United Way. And so, we'd love an update. I know Consumers is a big supporter. What's the update there?
Well, if you guys recall, the Goods Donation Center in Allegan was put together kind of out of COVID by United Way here of Ottawa County and Allegan, and it was great. I mean, it really helped get a lot of goods out the door for those that needed them, especially in that Alice population that they love to support, that we love to support. And now it's just only gotten better. EV construction made that, space a lot better. And we just wanted to help get that over the top, and that's been doing a great job of getting goods out into the community, and it still continues to, and it's only getting better. So, and I think they're doing some other things like job training out there too. Keith Van Beek probably knows better than me, but I think that's what's happening out there. So we're really happy about it.
Fantastic. Well, Rich, thank you so much. You and your team at Consumers are such incredible supporters of our entire community. So we truly appreciate your support and the work that you do to make this a great place to live. So thank you.
Thanks a lot,
Let's thank Rich and Consumers. All right, now it is time to get back to a little bit of table networking. So we are going to take a few minutes here before the presentation and let you get to know each other a little bit. So if you want to share, go around the table, share your name, company, and answer the question on the screen here. What is one of the biggest challenges facing leaders today? If you want to get real technical, you can pick a timekeeper and have someone keep time and make sure everyone gets a chance. But please make sure to go around and make sure everyone gets a chance to be heard. All right, I'll let you go. All right, it sounds like we've had some great conversations at our tables. And it's now time to get on to the main show. So it is my pleasure to introduce our two guest speakers today from Progressive AE. We have Joy Sportel and Melissa Malburg. Joy is an architect and planner with Progressive AE, and Melissa is a consultant for workplace strategy and design, discovery and design. So this is gonna be an awesome program today. Hopefully your conversations have primed you a little bit. I know at our table we talked about a few things that we'll be covering today. So please join me in welcoming our two guest speakers this morning, Joy and Melissa. Thank you.
I know. Are you on?
Can you hear me now?
No?
No? Can you hear me now? Yeah, are we good?
There it is.
Are you good too? All right, so thank you very much for that introduction. That was lovely. We're very excited to be here today. We're going to get right into it and tell a couple stories about workplace, and I think I'm going to go first. That's okay. So once upon a time, when I was a younger professional, I was at a design meeting with a couple of senior designers. And during the course of this meeting, early on in the meeting, we realized that the handouts for the activity we had planned did not make the trip with us from the studio to the office where the meeting was being held. I was then loudly and awkwardly identified as the individual who had forgotten those handouts and asked, "Isn't that your job?" It's a very gross moment. Everyone's uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable. The client's uncomfortable. My cohorts who I disappointed are super uncomfortable. And I doubt anyone else in that room remembers that moment today, but I do. I remember that moment. And as I showed up at work to work hard from that point on, I was motivated, instead of being super excited to be there and to find creative solutions, I was motivated by fear. I was very terrified of being outed as an imposter, as someone who didn't belong at the table.
So no matter how many times I hear that story, I get a knot in the pit of my stomach. It just doesn't feel good. And I think part of it is a lot of us have similar experiences, especially for younger stages in our career. I know for me, as a woman in a male-dominated industry, I was often the only woman at the table, younger than everyone else around me by a number of years. And it left me feeling like maybe I don't belong here. Is this really where I should be? But one conversation can shift the momentum of that type of thinking. For me, it was one of those times where I was the only woman at the table, only person under 30, maybe the only person under 40. And so I just sat back and I thought, this is my chance to learn. This is my chance to soak in all the wisdom and the knowledge from the people around me. And I don't think I said anything other than my name in the whole meeting. So as I walked back to my desk afterwards, one of the senior leaders from our organization that was in the meeting with me made a beeline to me and said, "Hey, why didn't you say anything in that meeting?" And so as I started to explain my rationale and my thinking, which I thought was very solid, he interrupted me with a huge reframe. He said, "You are talented, you have good ideas, but that doesn't benefit anyone if they don't ever leave your head." especially in places where everybody's worked together for a long time. Everyone has similar backgrounds. Everyone thinks similarly. A difference in perspective can be really critical for us to hear, but that doesn't help anyone if you don't speak up. It takes courage, but it can be really critical. That was one of the most pivotal moments in my early career, shifting the way that I approached how I showed up, frankly, to work and to interactions. And it's advice that I've enjoyed giving to younger professionals as I've worked with them in my career since.
So these two stories are really two sides of the workplace coin. That motivation to show up at work, that why we show up at work every day truly matters, whether it's fear in my case, or in Melissa's case, the motivation to be part of an innovative, design-centered team. So we should probably introduce ourselves.
Maybe.
Maybe. So we're Melissa and Joy. We're two designers that focus on crafting spaces and environments that help people thrive. And we're super excited to dig in today about why healthy individuals lead directly to thriving and successful teams.
So during our brief time, we'll talk about a few key behaviors that we've found in our work can make or break an important change in an organization. We'll talk about why and how to lead with empathy. Although it's desirable maybe for some of us, you can't avoid uncomfortable situations or discomfort. And you'll hear this a number of times, but thriving, engaged, successful people lead directly to the success of your organization. So, buckle up. We're really excited.
We are going to have some hard truths today. There is not going to be a secret recipe for secret sauce. There is not going to be a silver bullet to find success today. We're going to talk a lot about mindsets and why it might be necessary to shift them. We're going to continue to share professional and client stories while we're up here, and we're going to talk about tips and strategies for further connecting within your teams.
So as you introduced yourselves today, you had the opportunity to share maybe a tricky but simple question, if it can be both. What is one of the biggest issues facing leaders today? And I'm sure for a lot of you, something was top of mind, something that keeps you up at night. We had some really great conversation at our table, directly tied into what we're going to talk about today. And no, we don't have magic pixie dust to sprinkle over the room like somebody asked and solve all of your problems, unfortunately. We would be in a much different place in the world if that was something we were capable of doing. But we do have some things that we've noticed throughout our careers that can help. I'm going to risk a moment of chaos, but I'd like to hear from more than the 5 people at our table. Just shout out briefly a couple of things that came up at your tables. Some brave soul's going to have to go first to get the momentum going of who's going to shout out an answer. Staffing. Communication. Yep. Mentoring. Good one.
Yep.
Housing. Is that? That's a good one. Yeah.
Mental health awareness. Great one.
Right. We talked. Childcare. Yeah, for sure. We talked about generations. We talked about social media. There's so many things, so many weighty, meaty things that I'm going to guess most of them aren't things that you realized going into your career that you'd have to deal with as a leader. You've got your core focus that you thought you'd get to focus on. And as the world continues to change and the pace of change is more and more rapid, we are faced with this in a compounding number of issues every day. And it can be really easy to long for the good old days when things seem simpler, wait for things to go back to normal or to slow down a little bit. And the reality is that's not likely to happen. So what do we do from here? Let's get into it.
So while the problems we face every day may seem very specific to our own industries, we're truly asking ourselves similar questions every day. How do we incentivize our teams? How do we maximize our bottom line, our profit margin? How are we finding and incentivizing talent? And these problems are big and very important, but harder to find the answers to because the answers are more behaviorally based. They're less tangible. It's really tough to find these answers because you have to do some trial and error and be comfortable with more of a grueling daily practice to figure out these things. So as we go forward without a cure, a timeline, secret sauce, what are we pivoting forward towards and how are we establishing where we are today?
So I'll give you a tip, good or bad news, depending on your perspective. it starts with you. So the solution to any of these problems, or the ability to start to tackle any of these problems, starts with a clear and honest understanding of yourself. Are you behaving authentically? Are you living the values and the beliefs and the behaviors that are required to meet the mission and the vision of your organization? It can be hard. Sometimes we don't necessarily want to look at ourselves that closely, but it's very critical because our own core values and the way that we approach situations impacts every interaction we have, especially the higher up in a leadership position we are. Okay, we're going to play a game?
We are going to play a game.
Okay.
It's just like the game we played as kids where you picked your favorite spirit animal and you got to pick out which animal you got to be, except we're going to play the less exciting version, and I'm going to give you two options. So you either get to pick the ostrich, which is on the left side of the screen, or we're going to pick the crow. While you make your decision, I'm going to give you the extent of my limited knowledge of these two birds, just for talking points. So the ostrich first is very intimidating. It's tall, it's got that pointy beak, it puffs itself up to make it seem bigger. It's not overly pretty. I wouldn't call it a pretty bird.
Nope.
It runs very fast and can evade capture just by simply running away. It organizes itself in groups of 10 to 12 birds with a leading male and a leading lady above the rest of the group. And then everyone's seen the cartoon of the ostrich with its head in the sand. It just hopes for danger to go away. While they don't actually do this, I was told at my last talk, the metaphor is still very apparent, so we're going to go with it for a little longer. Next up is the crow. It's not overly popular within the bird category. It tends to symbolize negative events within someone's life in pop culture and literature. But they are social, they are interdependent. They don't do well in isolation. They organize within family groups that then cluster and form swarms to survive. They're very agile, quick, and nimble. I've seen videos and heard stories of a crow mimicking a dissimilar species when it tends to evade its prey, which is super, super cool. Oops, too soon. So if you raise your hand if you want to be team ostrich. You can do this if you really want to feel great about it. Okay? Does anybody want to be team crow? I don't have a great, you can caw if you really want to, if we're feeling really bold.
They're not a very loud group, though.
They are, no, that's good. So while these are kind of silly, we see behavioral traits similar to this every day in our work and in our professional lives. So if we're in the ostrich version of leadership, we're going to call it that, we've all heard it said, if you want to go fast, you go alone, but if you want to go far, you go together. And bringing our teams along with us is an invaluable skill as a leader. Hoping things change for the better. If we keep our heads in the sand and just wish things to go back the way they were before, hope is a lovely sentiment, but it's not a strategy for long-term success. If we double down on hierarchy, processes, systems, we're not going to tell you those things are bad or unnecessary. Some amount of that is healthy, but it also can't be your only strategy to control challenges and innovations within the market. Dissimilarly, the crow is very highly adaptable. It has a large migration pattern. It brings everybody along with it. We as leaders could benefit in taking a pause every 6 months and just saying what things are no longer serving us. Do we need to reinvent some things? What can we be doing differently? Making sure we're making time for those tough questions. The shape-shifting thing, we can also learn a lot from industries that are dissimilar from our own. Asking some of the challenging questions that we have of leaders in similar positions in other companies can provide valuable insight. And then lastly, both of these birds are probably largely pretty annoying in real life, but we as leaders have permission to be annoying with our vision and our values and our paths forward for our organization. Inviting others to be inquisitive and curious, how they fit in, how can they be a part of the team, all of that is a leadership example that we set daily.
So it can seem maybe simple to make a choice when things are spelled out so clearly in two very distinct categories, but we know that things that come at us in the real world aren't always that simple. Key is to be adaptable, be curious, be nimble, so that we can take on whatever might come our way and be able to respond accordingly with planning. And one last thing about birds, don't be a peacock. We can often think of leadership as this performative, bold thing that inspiring has to come from a pedestal in very articulate, well-spoken ways. And that can be true sometimes, but leadership can often be quiet. Influence, and the most powerful influence, can also be quiet. The younger talent in the workforce with us and those coming to join us soon, very soon, are very interested and eager to learn from authentic, caring people in the work environment. Think more about stewardship and less about performance and bravado. And that will go a long way to building those connections and those relationships with that younger talent that's coming our way.
For sure. So we know the business climate is changing. We know talent is changing. Many of you likely deal with that every day. So it makes sense that leadership also has to change in order to stay relevant. But how do we establish where we are today, especially with healthy workplaces, and what we're changing towards? So we've said it before, we're starting with ourselves, understanding and embracing your challenges, things that you consider strengths, but also your weaknesses, your blind spots, your tendencies when it comes to business and within your industries. It's all very important to understand before you start to authentically connect with your team. Understanding challenges, we aren't going to give you an excuse not to do the work and not to put in the understanding necessary for your industries. So as challenges come up, as there are speed bumps along the way, making sure we're approaching those correctly is a really big example to set for our teams. If we grumble about the newest disruptor or as something we have to deal with, your teams will adopt a similar mindset as they are asked to step outside their comfort zones. If we can reframe those into positive opportunities and things we can learn from, we're thrilled with failure. That's what we really can come away with, some valuable learning lessons. Those are things that will bleed into your teams as they adopt new workflows, as they're asked to try something challenging. All of us, regardless of age, I'm going to say this again, are looking for leaders to work with vision and values that outlast ourselves. We're all here for that motivation to show up at work. We want that to be what truly matters, and sometimes that means the motivation has to be more than the profit margin and the bottom line.
Yeah, and a lot of our clients are facing the same challenges. Goodness. We are often hired to come in and help them create a space that supports their business strategy. But the reality is that that's not a cut and dried solution. There's not like a template that we can bring and overlay on any business that will guarantee success. It takes the courage to have a sense of identity and the ability to move forward in an informed way without a guarantee of the outcomes and a guarantee of perfect success every time. I saw this in action with one of our recent clients. They are one of the largest in their industry, growing rapidly, astronomical pace of change, I'll say, in their work. And I'm ashamed maybe to admit in such a public venue that I had such a strong opinion ahead of time of what we were going to find as we went in to work with this client. They're growing so fast, they had to be churn and burn. Don't care about the people, hire them fast, work them hard, burn them out. There's always somebody else waiting to take their spot, right? And thankfully, I'm happy to admit that I'm wrong in this instance. That's not what we found. Quite literally the opposite. We found a leader that had a strong sense of purpose, an incredibly clear sense of purpose for the organization. And not only was that strongly believed, it was incredibly clear in how it was communicated, and then most importantly, authentically lived. The behaviors and the actions of the leader directly impacted and set the stage for what was expected for the rest of the talent. It was so inspiring. And it was apparent in every interaction we had, every focus group, every interview, we heard the same thing repeated in their own words. It wasn't like a rote memorization, robots spelling this back, of how the work that they did in their group directly led to the overall success of the overall organization. And it was incredibly inspiring.
So how do we apply this back to our own organizations, your experience?
Maybe redundant to say this at this point, but he started with himself. He had a firm look at what his role as the leader of the organization needed to be in order to help make sure there was clarity and purpose, that he was acting authentically to move that vision forward. He was communicating it and supporting employees in doing that, and then he trusted them to do the job they were hired to do. So it all comes down to this people-focused idea of leadership.
Yeah, very much. So as we go forward, we are going to share 3 skills that are imperative to leaders who want to truly connect with their teams. There are more than 3 skills you need to connect with your teams, but we're going to start with 3. They're broad, but also foundational, and they're kind of a launching point, so we can start here and build from there. These 3 skills are trust, vulnerability, and resilience.
So we're going to start with trust, what I would argue might be the most important of all of them. Trust is one of those interesting concepts where when it's high, you might not always realize it. If you're in a high trust environment, things are going great, people realize that, but that you might not point back to trust. But man, when trust is low in an environment, you just can't escape it. It might show up in micromanagement, in unhealthy internal competition, in, oh man, have you ever experienced like the meeting before the meeting, the real meeting, and then the series of meetings after the meeting, just because people didn't trust each other to have the blunt conversation in the room together. So there's a few things that we've learned that can help build trust, especially because this doesn't come naturally for everyone. The first one is curiosity. Simply being curious about the people around you and trying to understand why they are the way they are, why they think the way they think, what's their background, what influenced the way that they've arrived at this place in the world, why do they come to work every day. All of those things can help build a natural understanding, which leads to affinity. And it's a two-way thing, right? The more you show that you're curious about them, the more curious they will become about you. And so it helps build that mutual trust and respect. I will caution you with curiosity, though, that you have to pair it with a genuine and authentic sense of curiosity about the person and not just, well, I got to ask you how your day was, because they told me I have to do this at this leadership talk I went to. People will feel that lack of authenticity, and it will come across as interrogation, especially if it's a perceived hierarchical situation where my leader's asking me all these questions. Why are they asking me these questions? Am I in trouble? So pairing curiosity with empathy, which is truly just a concern for the other person and being able to put yourself in their shoes, can really help balance out and make sure that that curiosity is coming from a genuine place and that the other person can feel that authentic sense of care for them. Lastly, under this topic is to assume positive intent. The more experiences we have and the more we collect in our lives of what's happened in the past and what's gone well and what's not, it can be easy to approach situations with well, I know what happened here, let me go in and fix it. And if you come in guns blazing to tell somebody how to do it better or to fix the situation, it can backfire on you. So assume positive intent and plug back into those Wonder Twin powers of empathy and curiosity to really make sure that you understand what happened. How did this go sideways? What was your intent? What can we learn from this? How can I help as a leader so that we don't encourage or encounter this again? It can make a world of difference in how that other person experiences maybe a sense of failure or something going wrong.
For sure. I want to just reference back your experience with that client that you mentioned before. They had a very high trust environment and engaging culture. And not only does that benefit their internal culture, but Melissa and her team could feel it. So it benefits your clients, your community partners, your support networks. So while this is an internally faced talk mostly, but it bleeds to your external networks. Next up is vulnerability. So when you have a high trust organization, you are creating this general framework for work, and that can feel safe and supportive if trust is high. But within that vulnerability piece, the quickest path to getting that supportive framework is owning and acknowledging failure. Failure is inevitable. We're failing all the time, every day. Don't tell anyone. But the more often we talk about it and acknowledge things that we could do better, the easier that muscle becomes to flex, and the faster we move on and learn from those experiences. Second is patience. So help is often considered a little bit of a four-letter word. It's hard to ask for help. So extending that patience to others when they ask for help, extending that patience to yourself when you also need a little bit of assistance with your workload or whatever is a valuable skill as a leader. Others will also then feel more comfortable asking for help, and you'll get a more accurate perspective of your workforce. The next two go together, so feedback and counsel. If I want to shop something to someone for a review, I know that I can give it to somebody, maybe it's Melissa, and she'll tell me that this project, this site plan that I've laid out is absolutely perfect. It doesn't need any tweaks. It's ready to go. My spelling check is over, ready to go. But I don't really learn a lot from that interaction. And my plans, my projects don't benefit from that as well. If I can pivot and ask someone who maybe is less familiar with the work I do every day, less familiar with the project, I not only benefit as a professional in my diverse method of thinking about the work that I'm doing, but my project also benefits. The supportive byproduct of that is developing your professional network with those personal connections. You begin to think about things in a different way, and you're more accepting and open to feedback coming from diverse sources.
So I'm curious, how many people, don't be shy, feel like they always have to have the answer? Somebody comes to you with a question, being able to answer them and give them, y'all are lying, because I know at least one other person in here feels that pressure, right? Like you haven't gotten to this place. No, you haven't gotten to this place in your career without being able to answer questions and help people through things, right? But if that's the norm in your workplace culture, that you always know what you're talking about, you always have the last word, you always know exactly what's going on, and you never make mistakes, your team will start to act that way too. It's so hard to raise a question, point out an issue, wave the white flag or raise the red flag, whatever flag you like to talk about, if it's not normal in your workplace. And the fastest way to start building that muscle is for leaders to point out, that's a good question. I don't know. Let's figure out somebody that can help us with that. Or, hey guys, I need your help with this. This is a big lift. It's going to take all hands on deck. Let's figure this out together. That will shift the tone for how your team responds when something goes sideways, when something goes wrong. And it will lead to a much more efficient, productive way of approaching your work, because you're not going to get stuck, oh, God, I can't admit that this went wrong because, they're going to judge me. So it's a really important thing to keep in mind. Moving on, resilience. So resilience is the ability to bounce back when something goes wrong, right? It's the ability to recognize what's happening and either keep going or recognize that it's time to kind of pull the plug. So you can go on healthier and better than where you started. If we haven't made it clear already, and if you're not already sick of hearing about this, it starts with you. It starts with your approach to things, and it's not something that you can tactically plan for. You can't lay out every eventuality and come up with an if this, then that. You can't, design the perfect org chart or have the right set of KPIs that's going to eliminate any kind of risk or bad thing from happening. They all happen. The important part is how you respond to them. So planning for resilience really takes a team of individuals that are poised to respond accordingly to whatever might pop up. And that is something that leaders can cultivate. So looking ahead, recognizing challenges, helping reframe them into learning opportunities, helping people see that, that sucks. You do have to, acknowledge the thing that's happening. We're not suggesting on the one hand that you become Pollyanna and, just wear rose-colored glasses and only see all the good in everything. People won't respond well to that, but like Joy mentioned earlier, you also can't just live in the negative. You have to acknowledge it and then help people reframe what's happening, see how what of that situation do I have the ability to impact, and then how do we move on from this and get better. Recognize the limits, and plan for how to move on. I think I forgot to mention my first book club read of the day, so this will be my first book club read of the day. The Happiness Advantage by Sean Aker is a really great, quick and easy read. You can tell I liked it. I'm a mark up and flag the book kind of person. But it talks about how a positive brain can really impact the outcomes that we experience in life. And that's something also that not only can we foster in ourselves, but we can help cultivate in our teams. This, side note, is available at the QR code on our chat, along with a number of other good books and podcasts and articles that dig way deeper into some of the things we're talking about today than we have time to.
For sure. So these three key components, trust, vulnerability, and resilience, really boil down to one simple question, and is that, do you feel safe at work? Psychological safety is necessary, I would say invaluable for teams that are trying to excel and perform innovative work. Everyone remembers my experience from the beginning. That experience shapes who we are as individuals, and the negative experiences do tend to linger with us longer than positive ones. But I didn't maximize that into a learning opportunity. I wasn't overly supported. I backslid and kind of shrunk into myself, and I spent a lot of my energy in that role focused on self-preservation and establishing my role within my team to make sure that I could not be blamed or tagged to failure too. And while that is in the past, we should all be leading so others feel fulfilled and valued and as a collaborative part of the team. Psychological safety is a super heavy, meaty topic, and we are just touching on it briefly today. Melissa already mentioned the QR code. There are a bunch of resources online if you want to do further study. We've pulled a couple of forward on link to that QR code, but feel free to ask us about it afterwards or do some research on your own.
So what can you do as a leader to plug into this and build this intentional practice? I'd say it starts with having clarity of purpose for you as an individual, for your organization. If you're a fan of Simon Sinek, it might be your why. Start with why. It could also be thought of as your North Star or your core ideology. But what is that one key, simple principle that's why you're in business, why you exist, why do we show up every day? Make sure that that's clear, relatable, understood by your team in your organization at large. Mission, vision, values aren't just something that people need to know about. They need to see themselves in it and understand how the work that they do as individuals contributes to fulfilling that mission. So, clarity of purpose, and as you have that for yourself, as you have that for the organization, individuals can then plug in their purpose into that ideal. It also can speak to norms, rituals, behaviors, things that happen in the workplace that help us understand what's expected of us and how we do things here. So the last thing you need is to hire these really talented individuals and then have them swirl and wasting time trying to figure out, is this the right way to do it? Am I going to mess up? How do I do meeting minutes? We have a template for that, right? Templates and processes are good if they're used in a way to mitigate some of that swirl so that people can really spend their time and their effort on the thoughtful things that matter, and that's a good use of their talents. When that's present, people can then have the autonomy to use their talent towards meeting your mission. We, as humans, are wired to want some degree of agency over our lives. But that agency doesn't mean that it's a free-for-all. You get to do whatever you want. This clarity of purpose can give people the bumpers that they need to know that what they're doing and how they choose to meet those goals is actually having an impact. That brings a sense of fulfillment for them because they know that the work that they're doing is impactful and they're not just kind of throwing darts at the wall hoping something sticks. And then, along with that autonomy is support from their leaders to make sure that we're removing barriers, that we're helping push things forward and giving them wise counsel when they need it, to really just make sure that they have what they need.
I think we're going to play a game.
Cool. Yeah,
Pretty sure.
Let's play a game.
Let's play a game.
So on the back of our card is space. If you want to either use paper that you brought with you or use the note card. We want to put this into action. Think about 5 things that describe you, 5 descriptors of yourself. They can be simple, basic. Think about, for me, I might say I'm a woman, I'm a mother, I'm creative, I'm an includer, I'm a designer. Some of those are maybe similar. So take a minute and think of 5 things about yourself that you would use to describe yourself. And while you do that, Joy's going to give us another National Geographic update.
Oh, I am.
Yes.
Yeah. Take a couple of minutes to write it down, and then I'll kind of bring us back with this National Geographic update, whatever it's called. Okay, so as you're writing them down, I'm going to give a little bit of background to this. This National Geographic update is about icebergs. Many of us may know that icebergs sit mostly below the surface of the water, so 90% technically is below the surface. We only see 10% that is above the water line. And we are a lot like icebergs. So those 5 identifiers you're writing down, likely very few of them are visible to the naked eye. Can I ask for a show of fingers how many of your list of 5 are visible to someone else who may not know you? Or you don't have to explain to someone? A couple of
Lots
ones.
of ones and twos.
Twos. I see a couple threes maybe. So likely very few. We are constantly forming impressions and opinions of others based on very little information about what they hold true and dear to themselves. So let's just keep that in mind as we go forward, as we write down our own identifiers and as we interact with new individuals.
Awesome. Yeah, so let's take this a step further. And I see a few creative individuals using their phone to write down their 5 if they didn't have a pen. Very smart. So take a look at your 5 identifiers and cross off 2 of those items on the list. So of the 5 things that you started with, cross off 2 parts of your identity that have to kind of get crossed off the list. How does that feel? Kind of weird, right? Okay, let's do it again. Cross off 2 more. So of the 5 that you started with, we crossed off 2. We're going to cross off 2 more, and you're left with 1 piece of your identity that you can maintain. We were going to give you a few minutes to talk, but I think for the sake of time, we'll skip that part of it, and you can share your experiences with each other later. I will say that when I first experienced this exercise, it was, I knew it was hypothetical, right? I knew that I wasn't going to leave the room and not have these things anymore, but it was still really hard. I came down to being a mother and being a designer. So this like high sense of purpose, calling in my life as a mother, but also a key piece of who I've been kind of my whole life, and I had to choose between these 2 things and cross one of them off. It felt very wrong. I was joking with Joy that 2 days after a time change, maybe I would feel a little bit less like I need to hold on to my kids in that exercise. Just kidding. I love my kids. They're awesome. They still didn't sleep this week. This is something that, again, is hypothetical, but it's something that a lot of people deal with as they come to work every day. Are there parts of themselves that they don't feel safe bringing to work? So when people talk about bringing your whole self to work, is there something that I feel like I have to watch my back? I have to leave that part of me at home because it's not safe for me to talk about that when I get to work. People might judge me. They might think things of me and that will limit my performance or limit my ability to really perform at my best and at my fullest, contribute to my fullest. A lot of you probably have heard the term quiet quitting in the news and social media over the last few months, and while it's good clickbait, it isn't a new term. It's increasingly relevant in the world today, but really all it talks about is our discretionary effort. We as humans have limited capacity, and if I'm spending a good chunk of that capacity, that mental energy on making sure people don't find out something that's going on in my home life or something about me that I don't feel safe sharing, that's less time and energy that I'm focusing on value-added work in the workplace, which speaks to belonging.
Yep. So here come a couple of those hard truths. If we don't actively promote diversity within our organization, we will end up with homogeny and groupthink. If we do not anticipate and embrace new mindsets and thought processes from the younger generation, we will miss out on that knowledge, and they will miss out on ours. That's where that mentorship relationship really breaks down. The more resistant we are to innovation and change that they bring to the table, the more we miss out on. I will also challenge that getting consensus from everyone on your teams is a very challenging thing to do. And it's not an excuse not to move forward with innovative practices, nailing that vision and value statement down. The right people will find that energy contagious, and they will be on the team for life.
Yeah, diversity is a proven indicator of success. It's just not a feel-good thing. There's research and data that proves that having diverse mindsets at the table improves project outcomes. It's not always comfortable. It's not always the easy path, but it is a proven indicator of success. But that doesn't mean we just have room for diversity in our roster. Diversity is only realized as a benefit when all of those diverse perspectives and lived experiences can come to the table and use that knowledge and awareness to move your work forward. and to bring that benefit to your innovation.
Yep. So let's get everyone out of here. It is your responsibility as a leader to invest in your people, and they will be your most valuable investment going forward. Your team, your organization, your workplace experience are all your responsibility. And doing that is somewhat uncomfortable, but because it's uncomfortable, it doesn't mean we're incapable of doing the work. It's just unfamiliar, and it gets easier and easier with practice.
I'm sure there's at least one person in the room that wondered why are a couple of designers up here talking to us about leadership skills. So we are full subscribers to the fact that spaces can impact an organization's performance. But space alone can't make up for a toxic culture. It can't make up for a bad manager. So what we've found in our work is that when we walk into an environment where there's strong, authentic leadership and an employee base that feels engaged and included and that they can impact the mission of the organization, we can wrap space around that and help them do even more and do even better. So when space is able to be reflective of and responsive to a really strong, healthy culture, that's where the magic can happen.
Sure. So thank you all very much for being here. We are pumped. Thank you for your attention, engagement. We really, really appreciate it. This is very much the beginning of this conversation and not the end, but we're really, really thankful. Thank you for your time.
Joy and Melissa, thank you so much for the authentic and honest conversation this morning and for adding a little bit of fun too. We'll be thinking about those birds later.
There you go.
So thank you all for joining us today. We encourage you to stick around. There were some great conversations that we started and just didn't have time to continue to dig into. Feel free to continue the conversation either at your table or with others as you're leaving today. We encourage you to join us next month on April 11th for our Wake Up West Coast featuring a business-centric sustainability panel, which will be facilitated by ODC's Travis Williams. So we hope to see you back here next month in April. Thank you again for being here. Make it a remarkable day.